students who have behavioral issues. And I just more and more realized for myself, it's like, okay, I love one-on-one and I love working with people who want to learn. But the truth about the public school system, they're not going to put 30 kids in a room and it just so happens that everyone's really excited to be in English class and wanting to learn. And so it just felt like I'm doing so much more like behavioral management and paperwork and follow-up. And I don't feel like I get to love and enjoy teaching. I feel like for me, this isn't working. And my husband got offered a job in Arizona. And so when we moved, I decided not to go back into the classroom. So I'm not teaching anymore. I tutor Chinese students online, but that's different. So.
Very cool. So Arizona, that's where you're at now?
Yes. Yep. Arizona.
Now, during the teaching, were you still writing?
Yes. I definitely went through phases with it. There's being an English teacher, you can only take home 100 papers and grade them all and then sit down and do your own writing in limited doses. So I definitely went through phases, but I did start working on a novel. I was part of a writing group. Okay. I probably the last year I was teaching, I was doing a lot more short stories, just because they felt a little more accessible than a full novel, especially when you're just a little bit tired. I read a lot of short story collections, and I decided, okay, I'm going to just work on short stories, things that have a beginning, a middle, and an end, but they're not going to be 200 pages. And there's just more flexibility and all of that good stuff. So the last year I was teaching, I was actually writing quite a few short stories, and then I was part of a writing group and went to writing conferences, and I was really enjoying the community of writers that I was able to be surrounded with there.
That creative energy is flowing and sharing ideas. So now you're in Arizona, though. Do you have a new community writing group, or have you found one yet?
I don't yet. We just got here in January, which say just. It's been 6 months now, but
still.
So still kind of like settling into routines. And I've looked on Meetup, the website, and I've seen a few writing groups. Most of them are like a 30 or 40-minute drive where I'm like, I wish there was one a little closer. But I have seen a few, and I have thought, okay, I think when summer wraps up here, and we've had a lot of little trips and here and there type of stuff going on. So this fall, I would really like to kind of intentionally try out a few groups and find one that might be a good fit. Because I think there's even just the accountability of being like, oh man, like when I go to the group, I don't want to be the person who doesn't have anything to talk about because I didn't write anything. So even that can just kind of be a nice little push or give you some motivation to kind of keep on going when you're maybe a little distracted or putting stuff off. So
your process. How do you write something? Is it with pen, paper? Do you work better at nighttime? Do you work better at daytime?
In terms of productivity, I'm way better in the morning. Like, I'm just really good at, like, churning it out. And I think some of that is I always said that I'm not a morning person. And then when I started teaching my Chinese students, there's a 12-hour time slip. And so most of them are coming home from school and then, taking their classes in their evening time, which is our morning time. So I get up at 4 and I teach from 4:30 to 7 in the morning. And when I started, I was like, okay, but you know what? I can do it. And then I could go back to bed for an hour, but I never go back to bed. Like once I'm like up and kind of breathing and moving, like I'm up, I'm good. And then at 7 o'clock, it's super quiet. Nothing's happening. And I get a ton done between 7 and 10 in the morning. Just because I'm up, I'm at it, I'm doing it. So definitely just in terms of being productive, mornings are good for me. In terms of creativity, it can be hard to force that. There's that whole waiting for my muse, and also like you just need to show up and do it.
Yes.
So mornings are definitely I can show up and do it, but I have just a small paperback journal that I like. Every bag I have, I think, has some sort of journal in it, because sometimes something just strikes and you're like, I'm just gonna write this down. So I do, I have notebooks full of little ideas or mini stories, or I'll just paint a scene or a particular emotion or feeling, or I'll see someone that I'm like, this is what's happening for them, not in a stalkerish way. That sounded weird, but maybe an expression on someone's face or something they're wearing, it will just strike this, I could create a story about it.
Been there.
When I'm working on short stories or even my novel, if I know exactly what I'm trying to write, I've really visualized a scene in my mind, or I'm just okay, I just know it, I can sit down and type that. If I'm I'm kind of wandering through this, I'm still sorting out what's going to happen, that whole thing where it's I'm going to show up and write even if I don't have everything nailed down, I would rather do that on paper with a pen, and handwriting is a little slower and your brain processes it differently. And I really like that. Of course, it's slower, and then it takes you longer to do it, and then you have to translate it all back into the computer. Yeah. So it definitely takes more time, but it would be my preferred method. I wish I could say if somebody else could type it all in, but I don't think they'd be able to. Just especially when it's now the ideas are coming, and you're going fast and kind of shorthanding a little bit in your own special way. Don't know if somebody else could pick that up and type it for me. So I guess I do both. But my other thing that I do sometimes, because I really like to walk, so I walk a lot, and so sometimes if I'm walking a line will just come to me, and it's this is an idea that I could go somewhere with. I'll record it on my phone, and I'll just tell the story. So sometimes I will reminisce back to my childhood, I guess, and kind of more orally tell the story and imagine it. But then I'll do it, I can play it back later and type out what I like and change what I want. So.
Well, while we're on the process, of course, there's always that thing that confronts us writers, the dreaded writer's block. How does Hannah deal with it?
Yeah, so for me, writer's block tends to just have a lot to do with blank space or dead ends, just feeling what? So so a lot of people had recommended to me well, what you should do is when you're writing, at the end of it, try to leave it open-ended where it's I know what I'm gonna say when I come back the next day. I did try that, and I see where maybe for some humans that would be helpful. For me, it's just now I lost where I was going with that. I had a really good idea, and I shouldn't have trusted myself to remember it. So that was a no good way that I tried. If I sit down and it's just what is there to say? Sometimes I'll choose something physical, a physical place from the book, or the short story, and I'll just start describing it really in depth, just in writing. And it's more about just starting, because I think similar to exercise, the worst part of exercise is when you're laying on the couch thinking you should exercise. And once you get up and start, you usually finish. It's just the starting that feels so painful, and but should I really even bother? And I think for me anyways, writing can be that way. Sitting there wondering if I'm going to write, or sitting there looking at a blank screen or piece of paper is the worst part. So for me, the best way to just kind of get over that is don't look at a blank paper, just start. So just start describing a scene or describing a person. And am I going to end up using that probably not, or maybe I'll just clip a sentence out of it at some point. But like once I get started, then usually other things will come to me. Like, oh yeah, I was going to have this other, like I was in another chapter, they're going to be here. Let's just like get started with that. So that kind of spurs me on. Otherwise, sometimes just doing an exercise, like choosing a scene and like picking a character who maybe wasn't the primary person in the scene, and like what would they be thinking right now? Write that down. Or if your character, something is happening in the morning and you're kind of like, I don't even know, write a dream that she might have had the night before. And I think probably the biggest thing that helps me with writer's block is the understanding that I'm not going to be precious about every word that I write. And so by that, I mean, it's okay with me if I write 700 words and 100 of them are great and I keep them and the rest were just nothing, because they're never nothing. They informed my understanding of what's happening and my understanding of who my characters are and how they operate and where they're living or interacting makes me better at writing the scenes that you are going to see as the reader. And so if you kind of are like really uptight about like, well, I'm going to write all these words and I need them all to be good. And, this is the book. It's really overwhelming. And if you just go into it with like, I'm going to write 500 words today. And if they all end up being like not in the book, that's fine. Because it was my job to write 500 words today. And, I'm just going to write them. And it's okay if they're all garbage. Like, just get it done. And usually you get into your inspiration or you get into that zone and something good comes out of it. And I read, Stephen King's book, I think it might just be called On Writing. He writes, it's kind of his memoir about his writing process. And of course, he's so prolific. He writes huge books and a lot of them. Yeah. And one of the things, two things really stuck with me. One is that he writes every single day of the year except for Christmas and his birthday, if I remember correctly. Like, he gets up, he writes from this time to this time every day. It's not optional. And something that he said that I loved was, he's like, when I put out a final product, my book, I understand that, out of, say the 300 days or 600 days, however many days, that it took me to write that, a solid percentage of those days I didn't feel like writing, and I felt like I was writing garbage. And then I come out with the book, and he's like, and some days I'm so inspired, and I just know, like, everything I'm writing is just golden. It's so good. But he's like, when I put out the book, I honestly couldn't even tell you. By the end of the day, it's all edited, it's published, it's out there. A big percentage of that book was written on days that I didn't like what I was writing. I didn't think I was doing a good job of writing. I didn't feel inspired with my writing. But honestly, that's more days than not. And there it is. And people read it and love it. I read it. I'm proud of it. And I couldn't pick apart which sentences and chapters came from my hard days and which ones were my inspired days. It turns out that all of it worked. And that just kind of inspires me, where it's like, even if I'm, doing my 500 words and I feel like, what am I doing? Like at the end of the day, when it's all come together, it doesn't matter if you were feeling it or not. It matters that you had content that you created. It
was a necessary step to get to the next step.
Yes.
Do you ever have to walk away? Did you ever have to walk away sometimes? Like, you reach a scene, you're like, I don't know where this is going. Let me just walk away for a moment and then come back to it.
Yes. And I've had days where it's like, I take one of my walks and then I'm like, this is it. Like, and I'll say it. I record it into my phone because I'm like, I'm not going to lose this. Yeah. But when I was teaching English, one of the kids would struggle with that all the time, sit there with their blank page, and it's so hard. And they would fall farther and farther behind. And, it was broken down into these steps where it's like, we're all doing this step, and some kids like, oh, they didn't want to. And because a lot of it is this fear of like, well, it's not going to be good. And it's like, well, here's the thing. Like, I can sit down with you and work on okay writing and we can make it amazing. It's a lot harder to sit down with a writer with a blank page. Like, what, like, you have to put something on the page for us to be able to work with it.